And this is where I'm going to attempt to give you the rundown on one of my longer trainings in 15 minutes or less. So you won't get the full training, but you'll get a shortened version that should give you a little taste of what is in the longer version of this particular training. But you will get a lot of resources. Today's session that we're going to be looking at is voracious vocabulary instruction. This is a session all about how to improve your students' vocabulary and gives you lots of strategies for instructing kids on vocabulary. Now, if you're watching this, and I'm sure you've probably done some research and you've been very curious about what are the strategies to get my kids to improve their vocabulary, you might be thinking, hey, my students really use basic language when they're writing, when they're speaking, and I really want to up that level of vocabulary. If you've done any research, then you'll see lots of different strategies that you can utilize, but these five that are on the screen right now are going to continuously come up. These are five tried and true ways of increasing your students' vocabulary. So one is wide independent reading. Of course, the more text kids are reading, the more exposure they have to different words, and the more opportunities they have to pick up lots of unfamiliar words. Two is explicit instruction. So as teachers, we are going to have to instruct students in vocabulary. We're going to have to explicitly teach them some words, and we're also going to have to explicitly teach them how to go out and seek knowledge for themselves and learn new words on their own. Three, we got to teach students the different types of context clues. The authors are always trying to teach kids new words, and students just have to recognize what types of clues are the authors giving them. So you should look in your standards and see which types of context clues should be taught at your specific grade levels. You also can teach morphology, so teaching kids about word parts, affixes, suffixes, prefixes, right? Roots and bases, and how to mix and match those to make new words is a great way to help kids acquire new vocabulary. And finally, students need lots of active game-like exposures to vocabulary. The average student needs about 12 different active exposures to a word before they learn it well enough to increase their comprehension or are able to use it when they're speaking, correctly. So these are some of the things that we can do to help our students learn new vocabulary. Now, the whole goal of vocabulary instruction should be for you to create a culture of word consciousness in your classroom. You should want your kids to all have vocabulary confidence, not just your AP kids, not just your GT kids, but all of the students in your class, not just the kids who speak English, not just the kids who come from homes where both parents are college educated. We want to create vocabulary confidence in all of our students, and you do that by creating a culture of word consciousness. And in order to do that, this means you've got to invest a lot of time in building vocabulary. You've also got to leverage the power of student talk. Most of the vocabulary instruction or activities that you're going to see in this particular presentation are going to be ones where the kids actually do a lot of talking. And that's how students are going to learn the words. They have to use them or they're going to lose them, right? You also want to develop and hone students' word schema. This is just where you show students that they already know parts of these words or words that are connected to these words, and how to use that prior knowledge and word connections to help them figure out the meaning of unfamiliar words. Another big thing for teachers to understand if you're trying to create a culture of word consciousness is that the more vocabulary students have or know, the better their reading comprehension is going to be. So you got to recognize that comprehension connection to vocabulary. And finally, you got to understand that it might take you a little bit longer at the beginning of the year than it does at the end of the year to teach these different activities. So as you're learning them, as the students are learning them, and all along the way, all of these different activities that you're going to learn and do, it's going to be integrated with listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking all year long. Take a look at this video of one way you can create a word consciousness. I'll let you know.
A tip that I use in my classroom is what I refer to as college talk. I just thought of the most common phrases that we use in the classroom, such as stop talking, take out your book, I need you to focus and pay attention, this is important. And I just developed more higher level or college talk for saying those very same phrases. For example, stop talking, I've used stop socializing, or we're being very garrulous. When I'm saying I need to tell you something very important, I'll say I have an imperative announcement. This is very critical for you. So in the beginning, of course, the kids are very confused. They look at each other and they're like, what did she say? What is she saying? And I explain it once or twice, but I think the constant repetition of using the same phrase over and over, they get it. So now when I go up to my kids and I say, what do you think is the situation? What am I upset about? And instead of saying we're talking too much, they'll really say we're socializing or we're being garrulous and it's interrupting the learning. So it's very exciting to me.
So College Talk is a great way to start off the year day one with creating this word consciousness environment in your classroom and showing students that vocabulary is very important. You saw that second grade teacher and you saw some of those vocabulary words she was using with her students. How powerful could that be if everyone started off the year using College Talk and making sure that students understand that vocabulary is very important. Now, if you are someone who is really into vocabulary, then you should know this. When I ask my participants in this particular session how many new words every year should their students be learning, a lot of times I get some very low numbers like 125 or 365. But the truth is, as you can see on the screen here, from grades K through second grade, students should be learning about 600 to 800 new words per year. And then from third grade on up, it's something like 2,000 to 3,000 new words per year. And so that may seem like a lot, and it is. However, the truth is that anytime a student learns a multiple meaning of a word, that counts towards their 2,000 to 3,000. Every time they learn a morphological derivation of a word, that counts towards their 2,000 to 3,000. So really, we might learn 200, 300 new roots or bases or word parts, and then I should be able to combine those in order to get my 2,000 to 3,000 new words. So I hope you see that it is quite possible, but we have to be word conscious and we have to create students who are word conscious. Now, as a teacher, it's also very important that you know the tiers of vocabulary. So I'm not going to go too deeply into this. You can see it on the screen. You will also have access to this presentation, read up on it, but you should know that there's 3 levels of vocabulary, tier 1, 2, and 3. And although all tiers of vocabulary are important, the truth is that if you want to improve students' literacy, their comprehension, their writing, their speaking skills, their comprehension skills, then you've got to focus on tier 2 words, because those are the words that are seen across content areas in various contexts for students. So words like transform, conclude, analyze, those are the words that students might see on the test and they actually struggle there. Now, you also want to, if you're a content area teacher, you're of course going to also teach a lot of tier 3 words. But as I said, if you want to improve that comprehension, reading, writing, speaking there, then you're going to be focused on tier 2 vocabulary words. Now, you also need to understand, it's very important that you get the fact that vocabulary instruction needs to take place at any point throughout the learning cycle. It can take place before, during, or after learning, before, during, or after reading of a text, because if I'm teaching vocabulary, it should be tied to some text or some content, but it can take place at any stage of the learning cycle. So in this particular training, what I like to do is I go through some of these activities that you're going to see on the vocabulary choice menu. And I thought the choice menu would be great since we're trying to wrap this up in 15 minutes or less. And so as you can see here with this choice menu, there are lots of different vocabulary strategies that you can use or that you can learn to use with your students. Again, before, during, and after reading. It just depends on what your ultimate goal is. As you can see, I've tried to put on here BDA. So if I think it would be good before reading or before learning, and then during the learning or after the learning. Because again, students are going to need practice, so they need those active game-like practices. So anything with an A, that's going to be really good for that type of solidifying of the learning. Okay, so in the training, people get to play around with this little choice menu and they get to take a look. I also put some suggested or recommended times. Now these are recommended, and again, at the beginning of the year, it's probably going to take you a little bit longer to do a lot of these different activities. So we're not going to go into any of the activities, but just know you'll have access by simply going to this particular link It is case sensitive, so if you type it in just like it is there in your browser, it'll take you to a copy of this presentation and you can play around with some various vocabulary activities. Now, one of the things that I used to love to do as a teacher in creating this idea of word consciousness is I would require my students to bring me a certain number of words at the end of each week. For me, my students had to bring me 10 words that they had learned throughout the week, either in other classes or my class or just in their own reading. They could have been driving down the road and saw a billboard and saw a word that they didn't know, wrote it down and went home and looked it up and tried to learn what that word meant. So at the end of each week, they brought me 10 words. For you, I recognize that not a lot of schools or some elementary schools are no longer self-contained in fourth and fifth grade. And so you might not have time for all of your kids to bring you 10 words every week. So you can do a give me five. And this is where your students bring in 5 words to you at the end of each week. And here are those instructions. So the kids bring you 5 new words that they've learned for the week, and they have to bring those words to you in different ways. As a teacher, give students choice in how they can bring those words to you. Sometimes it might be on note cards or a Pictionary. They can make a Quizlet. They can do a vocabulary quiz if they want to type one up. They can put it into Google Slides or a PowerPoint presentation and have some, the words, some examples of it, and all that kind of stuff. So on Fridays, I would call the students up, and then I would look through their words, and a lot of times the words would have a theme, because I could tell, oh, you've been reading a lot of science books this week because I see all your words have to do with science or whatever they're interested in. But just giving kids the choice of bringing in their own words is very motivating for the students. So on Fridays, call them up one by one. I ask the students a random word from their list, and I say, what does this word mean? If the student can tell you what that word means, then they get a 100 for their vocabulary test for the week. Now, when I started doing my vocabulary test in this manner, I never had another student fail. So what happens if a student misses the first word that I give them? Well, they get an opportunity for me to ask them one more word in their list, and that way they can get an 80. So it's like you missed one. Okay. Now, again, like I said, I never had another student fail a vocabulary test when I did it this way. And they really liked it. And they were bringing me big words, not little words that were easy. They would bring me words like penultimate, the one you see on the screen here. This word was actually taught to me by a fourth grader. They brought this word in from it was actually on the book jacket, the back book jacket that they were reading. And it said, in this penultimate book to the series finale, and the student let me know that the word meant next to last. Okay. Now, at the time, I didn't know penultimate meant next to last. And what happened, or as another incentive for learning about this, what the students would do is if they had a word that I didn't know, then I would put their name and picture on a little star and put it on a bulletin board that said, on this day with this word, I stumped Miss Shaw. So I was stumped. I didn't know this word. And so I actually learned a lot of new words like this from my students by them bringing me words that maybe I didn't know. Learned so many words, but this in particular is one that's near and dear to my heart because I remember this word. Whenever you're learning words, sometimes you're going to think, I've never heard that word before. Is that a real word? And the truth is that once you know the word and once it becomes yours, you'll start seeing that word everywhere. As soon as I learned penultimate, I began seeing it everywhere. For example, take a look at what I saw in Grey's Anatomy one day.
Having a talent for something. Great. Okay, what do we got next? Oh, penultimate. Guys, that was the penultimate concert. Wait, was it the second to last concert you ever saw? Because penultimate means second to last. It does not mean super extra ultimate. The doctor said. What? Really? Vocab homework. Did you know that penultimate means second to last? Yeah, I knew that. Excellent. Any chance you also know what's wrong with my...
All right, as you can see there, I started seeing penultimate everywhere. I just saw it the other week when I was watching the Olympic trials, and they were saying this is the penultimate event in our Olympic trials. I've seen it hundreds of times since the many years ago when this fourth grader brought me that particular word. That's what we want, word consciousness for the students. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put the link back up here so that you can have that link and you'll go and explore. And hopefully, I've finished in under 15 minutes. Thanks and have a good one.